All right.
And a quick round of applause.
So much. Can you guys hear me from back there? Yes. Amazing. All right, let's get started. So my name is Jinny Oh, and I want to start off by sharing a personal story of mine. So for about over 12 years of my life, I had severe depression and often had thoughts of suicide, despite all the external successes that I had in my life. By the time I was 27 years old, I had traveled around the world. I made my first $1 million in revenue, had 2 master's degrees, was featured in Forbes, and was running the #1 UX agency in all of California. But despite all of the external successes in my life, internally, I felt like a complete mess. Most nights, I couldn't fall asleep without melatonin, sometimes sleeping pill, and swigging that down with whiskey. I was bulimic and had developed an autoimmune disease. But back then, I felt like these were all short-term sacrifices, a means to an end to finding true happiness. See, I thought that if I got to a certain point in my life, that if I had certain things in my life, then I would be at a better place. And for the longest time, without me realizing, I was placing blame on other people as to why I couldn't get to my destination faster. I blamed my parents for my upbringing. I blamed my exes for holding me back from the things I wanted to do. And I blamed my team for dropping the ball and not driving the results that I wanted. I was placing blame on everybody else except for myself. That's how little self-awareness I had. Fast forward to today, I am now retired, and I'm honestly living my dream life that I could have never imagined just a few years ago. I'm healthy, I'm happy, and I feel like I'm high on drugs every single day. And the one key difference between the life I'm living now and how I used to live is taking extreme ownership of everything that happens to me in my life. So today I'm going to talk to you guys about what taking accountability truly means, how taking personal accountability permeates into your work life, and also some exercises you can do to hold your team accountable. So let's get started. I want you guys to all close your eyes. I can see your faces, so you have to close your eyes. And I want you to think about the last time someone triggered you. And I'm not going to pick on you, so you can be as honest with yourself as possible. And think about why they triggered you. Maybe they didn't text you back. Maybe they missed a deadline. They left dirty dishes in the sink. Whatever it is. Now, I want you to open your eyes. I don't know if you guys have paper, or laptop, but we're going to do a little quick exercise. So I'll give you a minute to take that out. Okay? So now you're going to write on your piece of paper, I am mad at, put the person's name and the reason why you're mad at them. So for example, I am mad at John for missing the deadline. Oh, John. I am mad at Sally for canceling our date. Okay? Now, once you've written that down, we're going to take it a layer deeper. You're going to replace their names with the word myself. So I am mad at myself, and then the reason why you're mad. So I am mad at myself for missing the deadline. I am mad at myself for the date being canceled. So now we're going to take this one layer deeper. Why are you mad at yourself? Why are you mad? I am mad for not setting the right expectations. I am mad because I caught feelings too fast. When we keep asking ourselves why we're actually mad, we can dig many layers deep to get to the root cause of the real issue. Ask yourself why you're mad 5 times, and what you'll realize is that no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what the problem is, everything is your fault. Everything is your fault. But what's great about everything being your fault is that everything is within your control. And once you recognize that everything is within your control, it becomes easy to take steps towards preventing this from happening again. Okay? And once you feel, and you know what that feels like? It's fucking powerful. There was a man who was born in the mid-1800s named William James. And he was born with a lot of health issues. He was temporarily blind as a child. He had these weird stomach issues that made him constantly vomit. He had back spasms where he couldn't sit or stand for a long period of time. And despite being born into a very wealthy family, he was a failure at almost everything that he attempted to do. William James and I had something in common, which was that he was suicidal. But one day, while reading a lecture by the philosopher Charles Peirce, William James had an idea, and he wrote in his diary that for 1 year, he's going to take 100% responsibility of whatever happens to him in his life, despite how bad a situation is. And so during that year, he went on living his life, living his day, taking responsibility. And guess what happened at the end of the year? It'd be a really shitty story if he ended up committing suicide. What he realized is that by taking responsibility for everything that he was doing in his life, he was able to turn his life around and has credited this little experiment for all the successes that were to follow in his life, so much so that he has become the father of modern psychology that we know today. And the point of this story is that we may not be able to control what happens to us in our lives. Sometimes we're dealt with some of the worst cards in the deck. But what we can control and what we should control is how we respond to it. And as leaders, we are in full control and must take full ownership of 3 key things. Number 1, our vision. Number 2, our decisions. And number 3, our expectations and how we communicate these 3 things to our team. So the past few years, you guys have grown quite tremendously, and congratulations. It's an amazing growth journey. But now we're entering a time into economic downturn. And during these times of market uncertainty, it's easy for us to point to external factors, such as the recession, for if and when a company's growth starts to slow down. But if we're looking at internal factors like employee productivity or how we're spending budget, what we should actually be looking at in terms of internal factor is our egos. You see, people are emotionally tied to decisions. People are emotionally tied to a single decision that, in the grand scheme of things, have very small impact. As leaders, we should be conscious about getting people emotionally tied to the greater mission. What do I mean by that? When we make decisions that people don't necessarily agree with, sometimes their first reaction is going to be some level of defensiveness, right? So as an example, let's say, I don't know if you guys do a lot of B2B sales, but let's say I'm a salesperson at HelloFresh, and I just closed $1 million contract with a corporate partner, and they want HelloFresh to supply meals for their entire team for a whole year. Great, it's $1 million. But let's say after we have this operations meeting, the whole strategy changes, making this deal no longer profitable or even favorable. So you come and tell me to pull the plug. What's going to be my reaction? What the fuck, right? Like, I just closed $1 million and you're telling me to make an ass out of myself and go cancel that contract? I don't understand how this is a great decision. When something like this happens, you'd be lucky if you get any reaction at all. Because the worst is when they stay silent and then they quit out of the blue because another opportunity came their way. And this happens to us in our personal lives too. If you've ever been dumped out of the blue, it's almost never out of the blue. Somewhere along the way, you fucked up that vision for happily ever after. So, what should you do? Remember that we are accountable for our vision, our decision, and our expectations. Every decision that impacts the way someone works is an opportunity for us to remind our team of the greater mission. Why are we here? Why do you work here? How does the work that you do contribute to the greater mission? How does the work that you do impact what we're doing here as a whole? People need to be reminded of how they fit into the puzzle piece. And in communicating our decision, a conversation needs to be had around the question, do you understand why I made this decision? And by asking this question, what we're doing is we're creating a safe space for our team to open up and share their thoughts and their concerns. And it's a reminder, it's an opportunity for us to remind our team, again, of the greater mission. Get them excited again about why they've come to work at HelloFresh and how this one single decision is going to help our team step one step closer to that mission. So during the last few years, we've been going through a lot, right? Zoom call after Zoom call after Zoom call, dealing with people's emotions, unable to separate our personal life from our work life. It's a lot. I've been running my team remotely since 2015, so I know this pain extremely well. And one thing that has really helped me to get to where I am in my life today is how I take accountability for my time and guarding and protecting my time from every angle. It did not matter who needed what from me. I did not care, because time is the one asset that if I lose it, I can never get back, right? And once you start operating from that mindset, you look at your work and you look at your life and you start to prioritize differently. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people highly, highly underestimate how little time they actually have. So much so that there was a study done by Boston Consulting Group that showed that a manager spends about 40% of their time writing reports, and then another 30 to 60% of their time being in meetings. So when do you actually have time to do real work, right? So I want to share with you some quick tips on how you can gain some of your time back. And you might be telling me that some of these are impossible, but I'm here to tell you that change is not easy, and that if it was, everyone would be doing it. So number one, blocking out your calendar. To be an effective leader, we have to stay focused on our work without the flood of interruptions. There's a term in aviation called sterile cockpit, in which two pilots from commercial airlines are actually not allowed to talk to each other during takeoff until they hit the first 10,000 feet. And the reason why the FAA implemented this was that they were seeing a high number of accidents happening due to interruptions during this time of takeoff. So organizations need our version of the sterile cockpit, where our teams can stay focused without all the flood of interruptions, the constant Zoom meetings and Slack notifications. Okay? Protect your time and also encourage your team to block out their calendars. And I used to experiment with this a lot. So I had some quarters where I would block out the mornings and then had all my meetings in the afternoon, and that was great, especially if you're not a morning person. I always think that you need something to look forward to in the morning. Like, you don't want to roll out of bed and then jump right into a 9 a.m. stand-up call. That just kind of fucks up with your head. I've also done cramming all my meetings into one day, and that's horrible. Don't ever do that. Like, you end the day just thinking I need a vacation from this week. Before I left my position as a CEO, the most effective meeting schedule that I had was actually putting all my meetings into Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that way, Monday I'm spending time prepping the week. Tuesdays I have my meetings. Wednesday I'm doing all the to-dos that came out of Tuesday's meeting, Thursday meetings, and then closing out my week on Fridays. Another thing that you can do to protect your time is to also put a cap on the number of hours of meetings that you have in a given week. So let's say you're working a 40-hour work week. And I know as New Yorkers, you guys are working way more than that, but let's just say that we have 40-hour work week. You don't want to spend more than 50% of your time stuck in meetings. So in that case, your cap is going to be 20 hours. So if you have 20 hours of reoccurring meetings and you need to add in one more, something's got to come out. Like you have to substitute an existing meeting for that other meeting. So you can't have 21 hours, something's got to come out. Okay? Number 2, cancel meetings that have no agenda. Let me take a sip of water and I'll explain this. So I used to have my team send me agendas ahead of time. And so I used to have my team send me agendas ahead of time because the meetings are to benefit them. It's not for me to have a status check-in because that can be done over an email. So if there was no agenda, we were not going to force a meeting just because it was on the calendar. The meeting times were utilized to discuss and solve pressing issues and roadblocks. And so by having an agenda, we would get our direct reports to stay focused on those issues. And also, I need to come prepared to have those discussions. A mentor used to always tell me, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So, no agenda, no meeting. The third one, this is really obvious, but I don't think people actually put this into practice, which is to prioritize your problems first. A lot of times in our jobs and in our daily lives, we're going to feel like the therapist for our team, our friends, and our family. And we get lost in their problems because we love feeling like the hero. But what we're doing when we're taking on other people's problems is we're taking away their ownership. We're crippling them from solving their own problems, and we're avoiding solving our own problems. So the next time someone comes to you with a problem, you want to try this thing called the mirroring technique. And the mirroring technique is a way of listening where you're deflecting the problem back on the person. And it's really easy to do. You're just repeating back the last 3 things that they told you in a form of a question. And they actually use this in FBI for hostage negotiation. So it looks something like this. Let's say I come to you and I say, hey, Jinny, I have a problem with a customer and I don't know how to handle this. Again, you're going to repeat back the last 3 things that they said. So, you don't know how to handle this? No, I'm following protocols, but maybe it's the way that I'm delivering the message. How are you delivering the message? Oh, maybe I could be a little bit more thorough and be empathetic, so on and so forth. Right? We want to constantly deflect that problem back on them. When people come to us with a problem, they don't actually want us to solve the problem for them. What they want is to be heard. They want a soundboard. They want to be seen. They want to be acknowledged. They want to solve their own problems. But when we're taking on their problems, we're not just spending that 1 hour discussing it with them. What we're doing is we're taking that time and energy into our head that we can be utilizing to be solving our own problems. And this is going to sound a little counterintuitive, but as a leader, you have to prioritize yourself first. Take your oxygen mask first before assisting others. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to burn yourself out, and you're not going to be the leader that your team deserves. Because you're going to be stressed out and overworking everybody else out. So remember, take care of yourself first. Protect and guard your time. So in this next section, I'm going to go over what are some of the reasons why your team may not be accountable. And I'm going to tackle these one by one. I'll send the presentation too, so you don't have to write them down. The first thing is knowledge gap. Okay? If someone on your team seems like they're not being accountable, oftentimes it might just be that they're missing information on their end about what's expected of them, whether they're working so much in silo or that they just don't understand the business. And we have to assume that our vision and our expectations were not made clear. And it's up to us to fill in that knowledge gap. Okay? And in these cases, what we want to do is we want to have a conversation around the question to uncover what they understood about the assignment. But don't ask them, what are you doing? Instead, you want to ask questions like, what did you understand was expected of you? Right? And by asking this simple question, you'd actually be surprised how this highlights how poorly we have communicated our visions and our expectations to our team. So one story, when I hired my CEO, one of the things that he was accountable to was driving new revenue. Fortunately, for about 4 months, I was in a bit of a panic mode. Because I was like, I hired this new CEO, he's expensive, and he's not driving any new sales. What's going on? And by the time we sat down and had this conversation to try to align, to understand what's been happening, what we realized is that we had a completely different definition of new revenue. You see, he came from a military background where 8-figure contracts was the norm. And the key difference between what he understood and what was expected of me was just down to one single word, which is reoccurring, right? While he was going after 6- and 7-figure deals, what I was expecting was consistent, predictable growth through much smaller contracts. And all it took was having that one conversation to realize that he actually was being accountable to our end-of-year target. I just didn't see it from our week-to-week metrics because we had different expectations of what driving new revenue meant. So uncover where the knowledge gap is happening between you and your team. Okay, this one's fun. We now live in a world of inclusivity where everything has now turned into one big collaborative effort, right? Everything needs feedback, and everything needs everyone's opinions. But why? Right? We're meeting after meeting after meeting, providing feedback, workshopping solutions, sometimes in initiatives that we have no business being involved in. Not only that, but we're sending out meeting invites like it's free candy to all of our team, where they feel little to no choice but to attend. And now you have an army full of people in a single meeting that could have probably been sent as a single email. So what started out as a well-intended drive for inclusivity has now turned into a downward spiral of more meetings and wasted time. This is called collaboration overload. And you leave this unchecked, and you're going to have a culture of collaboration for collaboration's sake, completely undermining productivity. So not everything requires collaboration. It slows down decision-making and dilutes ownership. In the early days of Amazon, Jeff Bezos actually instituted this model called the 2-pizza pie model. Has anyone ever heard of this? Yeah. So the point of the pizza pie model was to keep internal teams small enough that it can be fed with 2 pizza pies. Now, the goal wasn't to cut back on catering costs, but to create efficiency and scalability amongst the teams, that they would make decisions and collaborate amongst those small units. But what they found out over the years that they were implementing this was that these small autonomous teams were actually rather dysfunctional. So the model has evolved into what they are currently using now, which is called the single-threaded leader, in which every small team has a single leader who has the full autonomy, authority, and of course accountability to deliver a single result. And they are able to staff the team however they want. They can build the product that they want without having to seek approval from anyone else. And this became so successful. One of the ideas that came out of this is fulfillment by Amazon, which is one of their largest revenue drivers in all of the company. So the key to the story is that we can't stay focused in what we do best if we're caring about what other people are doing. We want to stay nimble. Not everything requires collaboration. Sorry. You want to empower your team to stay focused in their own lane, to have their own conviction about what is the right decision, and not hide behind collaboration, because it's easy to hide behind collaborative effort. Because if this initiative goes wrong, it wasn't my fault. It was a team effort, right? We win together, we lose together. But at what point do you lose accountability altogether? Collaboration is easy. What's hard and what takes courage is leading with conviction and extreme ownership. Don't make people feel included, but rather make them feel unleashed at what they do best by giving them full ownership. Another reason why we may see people dropping performances, especially from our top people, is that they just might be having too much on their plates. And we do this to ourselves too. And sometimes taking accountability means knowing where your limitations are. It's knowing what you can and cannot deliver on, and being able to express that to your team and letting them know, hey, I can't take on this sixth thing because I already own 5 other things on my plate. And you're actually being a better team player by expressing where your limitations are, because now you've presented the problem, and you can decide as a team how you're going to reprioritize and who is going to now own this new metric. What we want to avoid is using "I took on too much" as an excuse. Because you should have known that by taking on this sixth thing, you're going to start dropping the ball. So one thing that you can do, one thing that's actually really helpful, and this is an exercise, is getting your team to write down everything that they believe they are the full owner of. And be specific in instructing this to your team. Have them write a list of everything that they believe they are the only ones driving the success for. And it's not a job description, it's not a long list of tasks, it's just what they believe they are the full owner of. And I guarantee you, you're gonna see one of two things. One, someone on your list, or someone on your team is gonna have a long laundry list of things that they think they're accountable for. Or you're gonna have more than one person owning the same thing, and that is our danger zone. We wanna avoid that. In the first case, where you have a long laundry list of things that someone thinks that they're accountable for, and this might very much be you on the team, we're gonna Marie Kondo that list. And if you don't know who Marie Kondo is, it means that we're basically gonna throw a bunch of shit out and become minimalists. So we're gonna do that to our list. If you have more than 5 things, and this is just an example of what you can be accountable for, it's meant to be very simple. So the key is to have no more than 5 things that you are accountable for, okay? And the higher up you are in leadership, the more general your accountability is going to sound. So for example, being accountable for the annual revenue target, or hitting our quarterly profit goals. And your direct reports are going to sound a little bit more specific, like driving web conversion or bookkeeping for the Canadian market. If you have more than 5, you're doing 2 people's job, and that needs to be delegated to your direct reports. The other thing, the more important part of this exercise, is when you have more than 2 people being accountable for the same thing. Again, this is your danger zone. In this case, what you want to do as a leader is decide who between the 2 or 3 people that has the same accountability is going to actually be accountable and own whatever that is, and then cascade that message to all the parties involved. And if you want to take it up a notch, you can ask your team to time track. I don't know if you guys do time tracking here. What this allows you to see is you can cross-reference what your team actually believes they are accountable for and where they're actually spending all of their time. And I personally really like time tracking because it's a great key indicator of who I need to hire next. So for instance, if I'm spending 40% of my week doing administrative work, let's say, then I know that for next quarter I need to hire an administrative assistant. This is also a really great way to know how much something truly costs in your company. So if you're having, let's say, an all-hands meeting every Monday, with time tracking, you can now see how much that all-hands meeting actually cost the company. And I can stick around, by the way, and answer more questions about time tracking at the end. I love talking about this in remote work, so I can do an entire talk around that. The fourth thing that someone might not be accountable, and this is actually the hardest to course correct, is when they're dealing with personal issues. So I had an employee, this was a few years ago, he was probably like one of the best designers that I've ever worked with. And just to give you context, I've worked with over 100 UX designers, seen thousands of portfolios, and this guy was world class. Let's call him Chris, for example. The only issue with, let's say his name's Chris, the only issue with Chris is that he was going to miss every single deadline. And it did not matter how much time we gave him, extensions, and it didn't matter if he was setting his own timeline, he was going to miss that deadline. And he always had a personal excuse as to why the work was not delivered. He was going through a divorce. His house had a gas leak. His daughter was in the hospital. There was always something. But we gave him chance after chance after chance because, well, we really liked him. And in the end, we let him go, and my only regret was not letting him go sooner, because he was a complete disruption to the team, to the rest of the team. Sometimes we're afraid to set disciplinary actions, both in our work life and dangerously in our personal life too, because we like the person. We want to give them another chance. And we also have this innate desire to be liked as well as humans. But by not having disciplinary action, what this is doing is we're setting a message of what people can get away with. And in this case, with Chris, we were giving a message to the rest of the team that it was okay to miss deadlines. By not having disciplinary action, we're doing a disservice to the rest of our team because we're making everyone's jobs harder. And as leaders, we have to anticipate the problems, correct the issues immediately so that it doesn't impact the rest of our team. Remember what I said earlier, that we don't always have control over what happens to us in our lives, but we are 100% responsible and in control of how we respond. So if someone is not being accountable in their personal life, it will permeate into how they take accountability in their work life. So, God forbid that this happens, but let's say you leave this offsite and you get hit by a bus, right? Knock on wood that this doesn't happen. Well, let's say it does, and you can't work for the next 3 to 6 months. How does this impact your team? If the company is so dependent on your presence, then you're fucked, right? And as leaders, we have to be building and empowering our team, but we can't do that if we're not replaceable. And I'll get to my point in that. And it's extremely hard for us to become replaceable because we've been taught that if we want to do something right, we have to do it ourselves, right? But that's not true because that's our egos telling us that we are the only ones capable of doing our jobs. Great leaders delegate and they train and scale their teams. One method that you can use to learn to let go is this thing called the Eisenhower Matrix. And this was popularized by an author named Stephen Covey, who wrote the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you haven't read it, it's probably one of the most boring books you'll ever read, but it's also one of the best books you'll ever read. So he popularized this thing called the Eisenhower Matrix, and just to give you a history lesson, Eisenhower was known to be an extremely productive person. He was the 34th president of the United States. He was a 5-star general. He ended the Korean War, created NASA, and he also had time to do all these extra hobbies on the side. In this matrix, what you're going to do is take your to-do list, whether it's a daily to-do or weekly to-do, and you're going to divide it into these 4 quadrants. What's urgent and important on the top left, what's not urgent and important on the top right, urgent, not important on the bottom left, and not urgent, not important on the bottom right. And this quadrant then shows you this top corner, top left, is all the things that you need to focus on as a leader. Top right are all the tasks that you need to put on your calendar. Schedule it out, block out the time for you to actually do those because those are important, but they're not urgent. And then bottom left are the tasks that you need to delegate. Bottom right, those are not urgent, not important, delete them. You do not need to do them. You have a million other things to do. Another method that I use, again, I'm going to reference back to time tracking, is at the end of every week, I'm going to review where I spent my time. I'm going to create a simple SOP, a standard operating procedure. And I'm going to write down all the steps that I took to doing certain tasks that were pretty repetitive in my week. And then also write down what were some of the details of the things that I'm going to care about if I'm to hand off this task to somebody next week. Build out the system. Become the architect and not the construction worker. But maybe you already know that. Maybe you already know what you're supposed to delegate, but the issue is that you're having a hard time letting go. I like to consider myself a recovering perfectionist. I'm the type of person that I'll start an art project and throw out the entire canvas if I had one bad stroke. It's a horrible OCD, and I know that I was a bottleneck for many years to my team. So if you're anything like me, how do you actually let go, right? It's a mindset issue. Something that I'm going to go back to is taking accountability for your time. How much is your time actually worth? Take your annual salary and divide it by the number of hours you're actually putting into this job, right? What's your hourly rate? And then the next time you're stuck in a small task that you're obsessing over the details, think about whether that task is actually worth you diminishing your hourly rate, right? Because more hours you work, the lower your hourly rate's going to be. How much is your time worth? And I also want you to think about the end game. What do you need to accomplish by the end of the quarter? And does that small task actually contribute to where you need to be at the end of the 3 months, 4-month mark. And think about what kind of leader you want to be. Like, do you want to be the leader that was working late and caring about every little detail? Or do you want to be the leader that built and scaled great teams? You can't be thinking about all the little details. You got better things to do. Remember that as leaders, we are accountable for 3 main things: your vision, your decisions, and expectations, and how you communicate those 3 things. Letting go is it's a mental exercise. But if you can get your team to reach 80% of what you need from them, then you can spend your time and your focus in getting them to reach the other 20%. And that's where your time as a leader should be spent, delegating and training and building your team. There's an old African proverb, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. And I have my personal take to that, which is, if you want to go fast, then done is better than perfect. And if you want to go far, then delegate and train your team. So we're gonna do another exercise before we conclude. And I want you guys to close your eyes again. I like to start and end with visualization. So I want you guys to close your eyes. This time, I want you guys to imagine that you are running on a treadmill. Okay, you're going a nice steady pace, when all of a sudden a strange man comes and puts a gun to your head, and he tells you you're running 26 miles, and if you refuse or if you stop, I'm going to shoot you and your family dead. How do you feel? Scared? Anxious? Now I want you to keep your eyes closed. This time, you're still on the treadmill. You're still running that 26 miles, but at your own will. There's no man. It's just you and the treadmill, because you're training for a marathon next week. How do you feel now? Motivated? Excited? Maybe even empowered, right? It's a marathon. Open your eyes. Sometimes the difference between a problem being painful and it being powerful is the sense that we have chosen that problem. That we feel pain if it feels that we have no control over that problem. It's forced upon us. But if we feel like we have chosen that very problem, then we're going to feel empowered. So reclaim your power and take accountability for every aspect of your life, because then that's how you're going to start to feel powerful. And I'm going to leave you with this parting word from one of my favorite books called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Accept the present moment as if you have chosen it. Thank you. I don't know if we have time, but I can stick around for any questions. We have like 5 minutes. Yeah. I could also stick around if you guys have one-on-one questions.
Anyone have questions? Greg, I know it's a good question. How many do you have, Greg?
It's just feeling like I hit my limits of just being so unhappy with everything in my life. Like I said, like externally felt like I had all these things going for me, but like internally I was not happy at all. And it began with me trying to figure out, okay, how can I change that? What do I need to do? And a lot of times it was just saying no, right? If someone's like, hey, let's go to this party, no. Hey, can you do this thing for me? No. Starts with that, I would say. A lot of meditation. And it's funny because a few years ago when I had the autoimmune disease, I still have it, I went to this doctor and he's like, you're really stressed out. Have you tried meditation? And I literally never went back to that doctor because at that point in my life, I was like, oh, I just need medicine. I don't need this meditation woo-woo crap. I never went back to that doctor again because I thought meditation was for like spiritual woo-woo people. And actually taking the time to reflect, and now part of my daily routine, I journal every morning just to kind of like get what's in my mind out. And what's great about journaling is it's not just me expressing my feelings, but over time, you've now created data of what's happening in your head. And so one thing I realized in going through all my old journal entry was like, holy shit, I sound like a crazy person obsessing over issues that were actually non-issues. So I think that it started there. It was just analyzing what's happening in my head. Any other questions? I don't know if we have time.
How do you track?
So there's 2 time trackers that we use in our company. So one is called Time Doctor, and the other one's Harvest. And we just kind of give that option to our employees and our contractors. The reason, because Time Doctor is a little bit more invasive. It does like screenshots, which a lot of people don't like. And Harvest just allows you to input your own time. And again, what we do is when we're implementing this, what's extremely important is to explain to the team that it's not for us to micromanage and see what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, but this is just for us to gather data about how much something is costing the company. So it always, again, starts with the communication of why we're making this decision, because otherwise, yeah, it feels really invasive. You're tracking my time. A lot of wasted time in meetings that people did not need to be on. And those meetings are costly. Like imagine, again, like if you have your entire team on all hands every single week, like how much does that cost, right? So.